Hello and welcome to Superintendents Roundtable. I'm Deborah Vinsel. Periodically, we invite the superintendents from the 4 largest school districts in Thurston County to come into the studio and talk about education in our community. And we're pleased to have with us today Patrick Murphy from the Olympia School District, Troy Oliver from the North Thurston Public Schools, Kevin Bogatin from Tumwater Schools, and Chris Woods from the Yelm Community Schools. Gentlemen, thank you all for taking time. I know it's a busy day, and we always appreciate it when you come to the table. Before we get started on things, I want to welcome Troy to the table. It's not the first time you've been here. You've sat in on these conversations before a couple of times, I think, but it's your first time here as the superintendent of the North Thurston Public Schools. So you want to share a little bit about that journey?
Yeah, so it was quite an interesting process. I've been in the North Thurston Public Schools for quite a number of years, almost 3 decades worth. And I've done a variety of different things. So have the opportunity to be a superintendent in North Thurston is just a great opportunity. We have some really good things going on in the district, and look forward to continuing those things into the future.
Well, we're glad to have you with us today.
Thank you.
So, gentlemen, let's start with how has the 24-25 school year been going? Patrick, let's start with you.
Well, Deb's good to see you. Thanks for hosting us again.
Good to have you back.
Troy, welcome.
Thank you.
In your new role. It's been a wonderful start in the Olympia School District. Probably the most significant thing to report is that for the first time in a long time, our enrollment is up. So probably not since 2019 have we actually seen growth from the previous year. We are up about 80 or 90 kids from projections and about 30 to 35 kids from last year's enrollment. And we did some analysis on that, and it's pretty interesting. You know, we were wondering if, maybe some kids came from outside of our district. We were wondering if maybe we were going to get a big kindergarten class coming in, and those aren't it. In fact, our kindergarten class came in a little bit lower, and that's something we've talked about before. We worry about birth rates going down, those smaller cohorts in kindergarten, first and second grade working their way up. The number one thing that changed in the Olympia School District was our high school came in way over projection. Both high schools, Capital Olympia High School, probably about 140 kids up between the two of them. And when we've done some analysis, it really is students that were formerly enrolled in the Olympia School District that came back, big chunk of them in 9th grade. And we're wondering, we might need to do some more outreach, but we're wondering how much of that is one more year removed from COVID.
I was going to ask if that was it.
That it's people that have probably been doing their best at home, educating their children and whatever it is. Maybe they were in private school, who knows? But they live within our confines, and they're coming back to school. So that's really exciting. We're concentrating on some key things this year as a district. One is the change to the Danielson framework. The Danielson,
which is?
the Danielson framework is the instructional framework that we use in the Olympia School District. It's one of 3 or 4 that have been adopted by the state of Washington, and it really guides everything that happens in our teachers' classrooms. Are you guys Danielson? Everybody?
Danielson, yep.
Nope.
Marzano,
and so that's one of the other ones. But we're doing a lot of training on that, and it's really good work. Charlotte Danielson is the person that's named after, and it's really about a more holistic approach to a child's education, really connecting on their background, their experiences. It's very much in line with our strategic plan in Olympia, so we're really excited about that. And the other work that we're doing is Brene Brown's work on Dare to Lead, which probably some people are familiar with, and we're really doing that as an administrative team, and those two things go together really, really well. So it's been a wonderful start, got enrollment up a little bit, and then we got some really good PD happening in Olympia.
Great. Troy, how have been the first 2 months in North Thurston, and also your first 2 months in a school as the superintendent?
Yeah, I think things are going well. So I kind of touch on one thing that Patrick mentioned is enrollment. We're, as public schools, very heavily dependent upon enrollment for our revenue. So we are about the same enrollment-wise year over year, but because we were a little concerned, we budgeted pretty conservatively. So we're about 130 kids above budget from what we put in place. So that gives us a little bit of flexibility. We've already added some staff to meet the needs for special education in other classrooms where we had some grade levels that came up above enrollment. So that's very positive. I think it's going well for us in North Thurston. Throughout the summer, late spring and early summer, we were in bargaining with our Teachers Association, and one of the topics that came up around student behavior was cell phones and kind of a mutual interest about what do we do with mobile devices. We had many of our secondary schools and all of our elementary schools already had some version of a cell phone expectation, and we just went district-wide with that in collaboration with our teachers. And we were a little anxious about exactly how that would go, particularly in the high school, and how kids would embrace that. And that's actually gone very well. We have 3 student advisors to our school board, and all 3 have reported out on more than one occasion how well it's going. Teachers are reporting out that kids are more engaged in class, paying better attention to what's going on. And the exciting thing the kids are reporting also is during the non-instructional time, the kids are talking to each other. They're not having their head down in their phone as groups, not engaging. They're actually talking to each other and engaging in ways that we haven't seen in a couple of years. So that's very exciting for us.
Can you give us kind of the framework of what that expectation is?
So we call it off and away all day. So essentially we ask our students when school starts, so before school they can have their phones out, after school they can have their phones out and accessible, but during the school day we ask them to put them in their backpack. We don't have them locked up in a locker or anything like that. And by and large our kids are doing exactly what we ask to do. We see a kid at lunchtime walking around with the phone, principal says, "Hey, phone," and they'll just put it away and away they go. So kids are being very compliant and that part's going well, but essentially off and away all day. So that phone is not to be out during the
but they still have it on
They still have it on their person.
That
was a concern of parents. What happens in an emergency situation? Get a hold of my kid. The answer is, well, if there's an emergency situation, they will get in their backpack. They will have their phone accessible to you. And you can communicate with them.
Good, thanks. How about you, Kevin?
Yeah, it's great to be back and excited to not be the new guy at the table. So welcome.
There you go.
And again, if we're only changing one of us, I think that's okay. So yeah, this has been a great start. I think I'll echo what Patrick and Troy both said, because I think there's some of these themes that we all have. Enrollment slightly up for us. I think ours is more in like 40 or 50 kid range, pretty close to where we budgeted, which is always good news. I think we'd much rather be trending that direction than the other. So we're not quite at where we wanted to be budget-wise, but it's close. We are also, and I think maybe Patrick was nodding his head, because I think there's a cell phone, this movement that it's occurring. I think North Thurston taking a little bit stronger lead in some policy and district-wide. Our secondary staff and administrators really led the charge for Tumwater. And so we have middle school off and away, and our high schools a little bit more flexibility during lunchtime passing periods, and that seems to be working okay with them. But I think echoing the same things, our students generally, if you ask them, they're not super thrilled about it, but they are also noticing a difference in terms of engagement, how interactions. They're not pulling it out as they're in the lunchroom. They're not pulling it out in the hallways, and so they are engaging with each other. And there is a noticeable difference from our staff, from our administrative team that sees that. For Tumwater specific, I am happy today is the 42nd day in a row that we have had no scheduled late buses in the district. And we have gone through a struggle over the last number of years. And I think I probably at this table talked about our struggles with transportation last year with an hour, 2 hours late for our students. And that was happening just about every single day. So we got some early momentum with some early goal setting. Really thankful to our HR team who did really some early hiring this spring, and that was successful. I think we stayed away from stealing drivers from our neighboring districts, which again, I was happy to sit here and report that, or else they get mad at me. But because I think we're always trying to compete a little bit with each other, and we have this pool of folks, but that is really good news, and we're getting to kids on school on time, and I think that's the foundation of this. Beyond that, yeah, it's a really good positive start to the district. I would say probably the other thing for my team, I'm in year 2 as the superintendent for Tumwater. I have already hired half of our principals at the building level, and just about my entire district level team. New HR director, new business director, special ed has been here a few years. So there's just a team and a brand new assistant superintendent on this instructional student teaching and learning side. So a lot of new energy, new team. We're going to be doing a lot of work to put together a strategic plan. So I know my school board and our staff are looking for that guidance and direction as we make decisions in the future. So it's a lot of exciting momentum heading in a positive direction.
Great.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear it. Chris.
Well, it's been a positive start to the year, despite significant challenges that we faced, particularly last spring with failing the levy. Going into this year, a lot of changes. We had about 100 fewer positions across the district and cut nearly $10 million out of our budget. But I think on the positive side of things, number one, once kids showed up, people were reminded very quickly of why we're here. And seeing the students, that changes everything. Also, it's been really encouraging. Our community has stepped up in big ways. We cut transportation to and from athletic events for our students. Our parents have stepped in and have transported our students to and from games at the middle school and high school levels. We've had the community step up and raise money to bring back C-team sports for the year. We've had the community step up and raise money for a number of things that we had to cut because of our levy failing. And so that's been very positive to see how the community has come together. I think the community has also seen the impact that a levy has when you have that, but also when you don't. And so I think a lot of positives have come out of this, but a pretty challenging start to the year. However, once the kids showed up, I think everybody was very excited and quickly reminded of why we do what we do. The other thing that was really telling for me is our district office admin team, our building principals, no change in our teams, with the exception of we had a retirement and we hired an assistant principal, and then we had another vacancy that we hired an assistant principal. So the same team of administrators across the district, and that helps quite a bit, especially when you're going into a year that looks very different than most because of the cuts that we've had to make. But all in all, it's been a really positive start to what could have been even more challenging, but our staff have stepped up to make it as normal as possible for our students.
Yeah. Can I ask about the reduction in staffing? You said you have 100 fewer positions. How was that accomplished? Was that reduction enforced or primarily attrition and you just didn't fill positions?
Both.
Okay.
Through attrition, positions were vacated and we didn't fill, but also we did have to do a reduction in force, which is very challenging, and it impacts a lot of people because these are people that are committed to our community. They're committed to working in our schools. They chose to come there for a reason, and often it's your youngest and newest staff, whether it's teachers, paraeducators, maintenance, grounds, transportation, based on seniority is typically how the collective bargaining agreement works when it comes to reduction in force. And so that was really hard because you're losing some of your youngest and newest and most energetic staff that specifically chose to come to Yelm. And that process in and of itself was one of the most challenging things that I've experienced. I went out and personally met with every person that was impacted by our reduction in force, whether that was reduction in time or their position was eliminated. And that's probably one of the hardest things I've ever had to do.
Yeah. Well, you've made it through the first couple months of this school year, so congrats to all of you for a good start on this year. We're headed into the end of the year, which means that the legislative session is coming up in January, and I know that educators all over the state have priorities for our legislators, and I'm sure you all do. I know you all work together on a lot of things, so I'm going to start with you, Troy, on what are some of the legislative priorities you would like to see our elected officials take on?
Yes. To your point, we do work together very closely. We work with our professional associations, whether it be WASA or WASDA, AWSP, to really make sure that our message as superintendents and as school leaders is consistent, because across the state there are some very significant and specific things that do impact pretty much all the schools across the state. Also, I'll highlight special education. The legislature has heard for the last number of sessions about the special education funding and the lack of funding to fully fund special education. They've made incremental growth over the last couple of years, but they're still not there. North Thurston in the last 3 or 4 years has spent between $6 and $8 million of local funds to support our special education students and needs throughout the system. Like I said, the state has made incremental growth, but we're not there yet. And I think to continue to raise that as a significant issue for the legislature is in all of our interests, not only locally, but across the state.
And before you jump from that one, the state's done their own analysis, and they figure it's between $500 and $600 million that they're short sending out to the districts. And I've always, when I hear a number like that, I always think of 1% in Olympia. So that'd be about 5.5 million coming to Olympia, which is about right, which is about how much we take out of our local levy to pay for, out of an enrichment levy, to pay for special education. Special education is not enrichment. So just to put an emphasis on Troy's point.
Okay. Kevin?
Yeah, I think we are all facing some significant financial hurdles, and I think so that ultimately is the general tone of our conversation. For us, one of the pieces we just recently looked at, we have a material supplies operating costs, MSOC, they kind of for short, which is funded. My insurance cost over the last 9 years has increased 300%. So from a $600,000 bill back in 2015 to now $1.8 million. And while I can't tell you exactly how the legislature, like what portion of that they fund, we have not gotten or experienced a 300% increase in funding from the legislature during that period of time.
So when you say insurance, are you talking medical insurance for employees or liability and property and all of that?
Our property liability, those costs.
Casualty
The
insurance,
benefits
right.
is that's a whole nother conversation. And the state actually has taken over most of that, and they pass the cost on to us. But this material supply costs are one. We're not only just seeing costs like that, we also see energy costs. All of our operating costs have increased on a really rapid basis. Just like everybody sitting at home, they've seen all their costs increase. So we've experienced those same things. And so I think that is one of those areas that every single school district is being impacted by, and we can all feel that and would certainly benefit by additional investments in that area.
And again, Deb, the state's done their own analysis on
Right.
this. And last year during the legislative session, they passed through like a $22 increase to school districts for MSOCs, but the actual cost to get there would be closer to $500. So it's just these tiny little increments that aren't meeting what we need.
Yeah.
Patrick's like our veteran, like
Yeah,
he's been
he's like,
around a while in our
"That's
area,
right."
so we're all the newbies in this
okay.
area. So we appreciate that, Patrick.
Jump right in. Chris?
Well, I think two of them have been mentioned. Special education for us, the only thing I'll add there is I think every district is seeing an increasing number of students with special needs that qualify for special education. That number is growing every year. And it's hard for us to meet those unique needs with inadequate funding. And so special education, material supplies and operating costs, I think Kevin spoke to that well, that costs are rising. However, the formula for what we get has not changed in quite some time. So we're struggling to keep up. The third area that we're asking our lawmakers to consider is transportation. Many districts struggle in the area of transportation. We're reimbursed based on our ridership. But many districts have to subsidize what they get from the state with that ridership. In addition to the costs associated with transportation, those are also skyrocketing, not to mention the challenges that many of us have in filling positions in transportation. That's just an ongoing challenge in Yelm to find drivers and mechanics and dispatchers, and it is becoming increasingly more and more challenging in the area of transportation, and we want to provide transportation to all of our families. And then this is obviously on top of the challenge that we're currently facing with the levy funding, but those are the three areas that we're asking our lawmakers to take a serious look at, changing their funding allocation for public education. And as was said earlier, that is a universal message across the state for all of us, and every district can relate to inadequate funding in all of those areas.
Do you have a sense of why it's a challenge to find people to fill those positions?
You know, we've seen that. I know in Yelm, and I used to be in Tumwater, and since the pandemic, that has changed. And I think a lot of employers are struggling to find employees. Transportation is unique. You come in the morning and you work a few hours, and then you are off in the middle of the day and you come back in the afternoon. So not many people prefer that kind of schedule. And so it's often people who are specifically looking for that schedule to maybe do something in the middle of the day or to have that time off. And so oftentimes it's because of the schedule alone that you're employing somebody for half of their day in the morning and the other half in the afternoon, and then they have that break in the middle. That can be challenging.
Okay.
We legalized in the state of Washington. You see some stores pop up that if you use that product, you're no longer eligible to drive a bus.
Gotcha.
And so that's a challenge, I think, when you add legalizing,
Cannabis.
cannabis in our area, that you end up excluding a group of people, again, that are doing things completely legal, but they know that they can't end up
can't
getting a
qualify.
driver's license to drive students. And so, again, I think it's just added challenges when we have laws that are passed like that I don't think anyone necessarily sees an impact to schools. It's just, I think now years later, you start to realize it.
Did you have anything you wanted to add to that one?
I guess I just emphasize a couple other points. I mean, inflation is affecting everybody, right? Not just school districts. People at home go to the grocery store. Those food costs just to buy a little thing of ground beef is like, compared to 3 years ago, is like outrageous. And all of that stuff is impacting us across our entire system. So that MSOC piece is affecting our ability to do so many things besides that. But I just want to do a little reminder, Deb, of what we've talked about in previous years around special education. There's two main components to it. One is the cap and one is the multiplier. And the legislatures have made some movement in the cap area. I think it's up to 15.5% now or something like that. Our district is well over 16%. If you count our elementary schools, we're about 20% across our elementary grades. Plus, every kid that's on an IEP is different. And some are getting really intense services and some are not. So that cap piece is, we've said before, Yelm does not turn kids away if they go, oh, sorry, we're at 15.5%, we're not going to take any more kids. So the cap needs to go away, or they need to put it up to a level that is the level that any district will not have to go into a local levy to do that. Second thing is the multiplier, which goes to that part about the expense of the services provided for kids. And it's been very obvious for years that the basic rate that they're giving is not paying for the average cost for kids in our system. So those are the two things that they're going to look at this legislative session. But again, it's almost $500 million to get there. The other thing I wanted to mention was the levy. When McCleary happened, there was no need to impact anybody's local levies, but they did, and they limited our abilities to collect. And a lot of people right now are saying, if the legislature doesn't fix this and send more money, then allow us to collect more money locally, which all of us have, usually the ability to do that, but not everybody. We just learned a really tough lesson in Yelm, and hopefully those things are going to go the way they need to go. But if that happens, there is the potential, we talked about it at a superintendent's meeting this morning, where we're going to get back to the haves and the have-nots, where you're going to see Seattle's and Bellevue's and people being given the ability to raise a bigger levy, like all his grandfather districts in the past that had 35% levy lids and everybody else was at 24%. We can't go back to that. So if they're going to make a levy change, which I'm not opposed to that at all. In fact, we're leaving money on the table that our voters approved. They just need to make sure that they do it in an equitable way, that Olympia and other places that can do that can collect that money, but also have levy equalization for the districts that can't pass that. So just wanted to add that piece.
Can we talk just a little bit more about special education? And I'm daughter of a special ed teacher, so.
Thank you for that.
I think a lot of folks may not really understand what that term special education encompasses. And there was a time when that meant students who had significant developmental challenges. But that is not what special education is these days. So would you like to take a few minutes and just discuss, really, truly, when you talk about special education in your schools, what the students, what kinds of, how do I put this without, I don't want to sound it like it's like I'm quantifying anything, but students have different needs, as you just said, and sometimes those needs are not really apparent because the student seems to be, completely capable of being in a learning environment. So can we just talk a little bit about what special ed covers?
In order to qualify for special education, a student does need to have a diagnosed disability that is impacting their ability to learn. And you're right, there's a wide variety. In the Olympia School District, I asked my executive director of special education once, I said, what percentage of our students, and we have about 1,800 kids in Olympia, what percentage of our students in Olympia that are receiving special education services are basically at the same cognitive level as their peers, meaning ability to do any subject matter, math, science, as their peers? And he said probably 85%. Mm-hmm. Right, so 85%. So that means, so then you ask the question, because this is what I asked when I first came to the district 8 years ago, is I said, well then how come there's only, I can count on one hand, kids receiving special services that are receiving advanced placement in IB classes? Because they have the same ability level. It's a health impairment. It could be ADHD. It could be things that, it's a, we often use the term resource room, where kids are getting resourced, but they're in regular education classes the bulk of the time. That's the overwhelming majority of our students. And if you look at the data, those kids graduated at a much lesser rate. Their achievement levels are less. Their access to classes, like I was mentioning, is less. And it's a constant equity issue for school districts across our region and across the state. So, that's my quick breakdown on disability, but open that up to the rest.
The only thing I would add to that is, students, many receive specialized services like speech language or occupational therapists, physical therapy stuff. So anything that's a disability that gets in the way of students learning, we address those. And that's a lot of our early learning students, kids coming up through our developmental preschool program into the early grades.
Which
have a lot
hopefully
of those
that's
services.
where you discover these potential issues, because as you were saying, it's not a cognitive issue. It's not an intellectual issue so much. Sometimes it's vision, sometimes it's audio. My mother shared with me a story about a kid who could not look at the board and copy a sentence off the board. He had to do one word at a time because he didn't have visual memory. But cognitively,
how frustrating for that
exactly.
student. Yeah.
And then another student of hers who couldn't take dictation. Same thing. You had to do one or two words at a time. So these are the kinds of things that I think folks don't recognize, those kinds of learning disabilities that fall under that special education umbrella that sometimes are not caught until late in a student's academic career. So hopefully you catch them when they're early.
We've seen a huge increase. I don't know. So in my tenure in education under autism spectrum disorder, just this growing. Again, it is a spectrum. So we have some that you would say very visible, very clear, and on the other end of that spectrum, it doesn't appear that there's any impact. Right. Yet there is, especially on social interaction. So that number has just gone off the chart for school districts. And again, because it's a wide spectrum, there's not the cookie cutter easy solution. So we talk about special education, it is about individualizing, and it is about meeting the individual needs of students. And it poses challenges for our systems to try to do that. And I just like anxiety and mental health and pieces and behavior. I don't want to always say that is necessarily a disability, but all those things end up impacting students' ability to access education, which opens the door around some other diagnosis, and it gets a little more complex, and we start talking about behavior and mental health and trauma and those. And
those things can be debilitating.
And we have IEPs for students that are with that diagnosed disability, like we've been talking about. But there's also something called 504, which is also, it could be a temporary disability or something that's impacting kids in school. Maybe it was a mobility issue from a car accident. Maybe it is anxiety and depression that's being treated. So there's a wide variety, and that's above and beyond students that are being.
We don't get funded for that piece at all.
No.
But you make you still serve the students.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You look like you have something you want to say.
You know, this is a topic that I am very passionate about, and I think the biggest reason I'm in public education is because of experience I had as a third grader working with students with special needs. Yesterday was probably one of the greatest days in my career with our student support team. There were about 10 of us. We all dressed up. The theme was Toy Story, and I got to be Woody. And we went to every special program in our district at every single building. We started at 7:30 and finished at 12:30. And it was just a reminder that we have students with different abilities across all of our buildings. And the other reminder is how amazing our staff are. These are people that specifically choose to work with students who have different ways of learning because they want to help level the playing field for them and provide opportunities that they might not otherwise have. And I think our staff do amazing things. I think you could consider them superhero status. It is pretty amazing what they do because every classroom has a student that is impacted, and some are visible, some are invisible, but our staff do an amazing job of identifying what those needs are and providing the very best they can for them. I will also say that it's really challenging to have enough staff to provide all the needs for these students, but that's our job, is to provide everything that these students need, much like we do for students without disabilities. And I just can't say enough about the people who choose to do this work. And I can't say enough about these students that we get to serve. They're amazing. And like I said yesterday, I don't know if it was more meaningful for me or for the students, but the smiles certainly are something that I'm going to remember for a long time.
And it's our job. It's some of the most inspirational work that we do. It's why many of us went into the business. It's also a federal civil right. And if we're not getting the money to do it, it doesn't matter. We are obligated to meet the needs and the accommodations of that student. That's why we're talking about this budget piece so passionately.
Well, from your lips to our legislators' ears and the governor's desk, we hope that happens. Your story actually is a great segue into kind of our closing comments, which are highlights of something, really cool, special, fun, that has either happened or that you're looking forward to. So you can think of another story.
Okay.
And I'm going to start with you, Kevin, on this one.
Yeah, I'm. There's not a lot of celebrations. It feels like we struggle to do that, and I think we look for opportunities. Tumwater was named Pacific Education Institute the Field STEM District of the Year.
Nice.
And so this is really about connecting kids to outdoor learning. So we have some really passionate educators in the Tumwater School District doing really innovative things in stream restoration and learning about impacts on the environment. And so that the one to be acknowledged in that way, but it is really about our educators and who are working with kids and getting them outside. And I thought that was really, really exciting for our school district and something to be proud of.
Do you want me to come back to you, or you got another story
No,
for us?
it's
Okay.
hard to top yesterday. Like I said, just a great opportunity to see our students. But looking ahead for us, our board recently approved a resolution, and we are running a levy in February. And we've got, I think, some good momentum. We've had people come forward who have been involved in helping levies and bonds in the past that maybe weren't as involved this last go around, and they've stepped up to say, hey, we're back, we want to help. And that's encouraging. And I think our community knows how valuable that replacement levy is now that we've gone without some of the things that the levy funds. I also met with the city recently to go over development and planning. And between now and 2028, we're going to have about 1,000 units just in city limits. And that's residential, single-family homes, that's apartments, that's townhomes, duplexes. Most of those are going to be within the next 2 years. And so we know people are continuing to come to Yelm. It's an amazing community, And we've got some significant challenges ahead to plan for that growth. Things like potentially adjusting boundaries of our elementary schools, talking about a 10, 15-year plan for growth. Yelm is one of those communities that's continuing to experience growth and in a big way. And that's encouraging and that's positive. And so I think even with the challenges we've had, a lot of good things coming in the future that I'm really excited about.
Great. When your levy passes, when does that take effect?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. A lot of people don't realize if we run it in February, we would not see any of those funds until the following January. So regardless of the outcome of that levy, regardless of what happens there, we're still going to go a calendar year without those levy dollars, and that's why we had to make those significant cuts. We'll be making some more cuts this spring, but we were planning to cut deep enough last spring that these ones would be more of adjustments to get us from this January through the next January.
Okay.
Deb, did I mention that we had 42 days straight of no late processing?
You did. You
All right.
did.
Sorry to interrupt you,
did.
Pat.
You
This is
did.
good. Okay,
42.
Yeah.
42 days, yeah.
I'm still trying to get the vision of Superintendent Woods as Woody, but the drawstrings are snaking.
There's a snake in my boot.
Yep.
Yeah.
I was hoping you'd sing a little bit.
We don't have time.
All right.
Woody's Roundup.
I wanted to mention a couple of things. One, but before I talk about some really cool things that we've already done this year, I would recommend a book called The Anxious Generation. It's by a gentleman named, I believe it's John Haidt. I think he's a professor at NYU. But a lot of the conversation that was happening about cell phone and the mental health crisis, the rewiring of the adolescent brain, and sort of just the experimentation that was done on youth, particularly girls around social media and phones. Really important read. We're at Olympia High School, Reeves Middle School. There's a few of our schools that are doing it as a book study for the year. It's really influencing a lot of what we're doing around the phone piece, and it's super, super important. And it can't just be the school. It has to be the parents. It has to be the staff. It has to be students recognizing, what's happening. So I wanted to mention that. Second thing I wanted to mention in terms of a special education piece, there was a recent article in Thurston Talk about our Transition Academy. So we serve students infant toddler in the Olympia School District through the age of 22. And we can have a segment about that later because they just increased the age from 21 to 22. And so from the ages of 18 to 22, those are students that we never had any intention of graduating when they got to 18. And those Transition Academy programs, especially, I'm going to speak to ours in Olympia, are amazing. And if you can go to Thurston Talk, there's an article about it and the way that we provide job skills, the way we partner with the County Food Bank, with Evergreen College, State College, with Morningside. It's just this amazing program for dozens and dozens of students with more profound disabilities and really helping them to become independent. And I would encourage people to look at that. The last thing I would share is we did something that my colleagues to my left have already done, and it's overdue for us in the Olympia School District, is a step with our local tribes. And we had a flag raising ceremony last month with the Squaxin tribe at our district office. Griffin's also already done that with the Squaxin tribe. And just really powerful and important step in a deepening of that relationship. And I was so grateful to Chairman Peters from the tribe for coming and speaking. There was drumming, there was dancing, there was hard truths that we need to hear about our education system. But it's just that in ever increasing partnership with our tribes that doesn't just help our native kids, but helps all kids to know that history. And so just so grateful for that, and it was a wonderful ceremony, and there's information on our website about how that went and the continuing work around since time immemorial curriculum and lots of things we're going to be doing. So.
Okay, great. Troy, you get the last word today.
Yeah, so a couple things. First of all, I'll talk a little bit about our construction program. We were fortunate in 2020 to pass a bond literally weeks before the pandemic. And we've completed Camacho Middle School. That project is completely done. That building is completely transformed. It is amazing. And someone who was principal there for almost a decade, just the way that project turned out is thrilling. Our major project is River Ridge High School. We're about halfway through there. If you want to drive down to that campus, it's completely transformed. The new instructional wing is completely up and framed in, and we will, after the first of the year, we'll be able to move into the new commons for our students, and then by next fall, be in the new classroom wing and begin to finish out the rest of that project. So we're really excited about how those things are going. They're on time, they're under budget. Our construction team has done a fantastic job working with our contractors to make sure those things happen. The other thing I want to touch on is this year, as we've done for a number of years in North Thurston Public Schools, we have a theme for the year. And this year the theme is Joy of Learning. And I shared that at our staff opening in August, and the response, I don't know what I expected, but it was very positive. It was just embracing that joy of learning. We've been through some tough years, and there's still a lot of things that are difficult and a lot of things that our students need us to pay attention to and our staff needs to pay attention to. But I think we've sort of lost that joy of learning, and school should be fun. School should be engaging. Kids can come to school, our staff can come to work, do difficult things, and celebrate their successes. And when we don't do well, it's not the end of the world. And to find that joy is something that we're really focused on. Our communications department is going out into schools weekly and finding examples of joy of learning, and we're putting that out on our website and sharing everywhere and every place we can. An example would be Liddy Hawk Elementary School. Before school program, they have a dual language read aloud with kiddos that are volunteering to come in. It's we have a dual language program at that school, and those kids are showing up before school in the library to be part of that. It's just one example of the joy of learning that we're trying to highlight throughout the course of the year, and it's going well, and I think it's uplifting. And as we head into the dark days of winter, keeping that out in front, I think will help us get through as we get to the spring.
We all need joy in the dark days.
Yes.
They don't last that long, fortunately. So, well, thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedules to be with us here at the Roundtable again. What a great conversation. I always learn so much when you're here, and I hope our viewers do too. So we'll see you again after the first of the year, probably.
Thanks, Deb.
We want to
Thank
thank
you.
you for watching also. Remember, if you're the parent of a preschool child, read with your child at least 20 minutes a day. It's one of the best things you can do to get them ready for school. And while you're at it, throw in some counting and number games to get them a little bit interested in math. If you're the parent of a school-age child, get involved with your child's education. There are many ways that you can volunteer and support your young person. Talk to their teacher or to their principal, or go to the school or district website to see what opportunities there are for you. Again, thank you for joining us here at the Superintendents Roundtable. For all of us here at Thurston Community Media, I'm Deborah Vinsel. We'll see you after the first of the year.